Welcome to Napa Valley Inside Out. I'm Latife Hayson, and I am delighted to be hosting this podcast, shining a light on one of the most beautiful and coveted lifestyles in the world. If you're interested in developing a property, planting a vegetable garden, making olive oil, fashion, architecture, interior design, county rules and regulations, biking paths, art, getting into the wine business, farming practices, the tax benefits of owning a vineyard, or the ultimate private tours and tastings, and all the fabulous annual cultural events we enjoy here, and so much more, then you won't want to miss this show. Every week I will be interviewing amazing talent, vintners, entrepreneurs, leaders, consultants, festival organizers, and well-known personalities in the Valley. They will share their knowledge, experience, advice, goals, passions, and their best-kept secrets. Barney Welsh of Forni-Brown-Welsh is with us today. For those of you who don't know what we locals refer to as Forni-Browns, you are in for a real treat. Barney is going to share some amazing stories from their annual plant sale and give us some advice on planting a vegetable garden and how to maintain it. So welcome, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a real treat. I appreciate it.
Nobody has been looking more forward to this interview than I. So firstly, I have to say that, as you know, Napa Valley is in mourning that Forni-Browns, that has been operating since the late 70s, having an annual plant sale for the last 22 years, just had its last annual plant sale this spring in 2018.
It's true.
Yeah.
That part is true.
Yeah, and why was that?
The time bandit. You can't, there's no real photograph where you can just continually stay young. And I'm the oldest of the three partners, and we all getting down is easy, getting back up takes a little longer.
Yeah.
So there's a use-by date in all of us, unfortunately, but the experience was fabulous, and I already miss it.
Oh. So give us a little history on how this extraordinary team came together and what the specialties were of each partner. And I love the story about how you came onto the grand stage and joined the partnership at a roadside stand in 1988, just north of Deer Park Road. So give us a little history.
Yes, thank you. In fact, it was not even a roadside stand. It was a place I knew they were gardening. So I came by one morning rather early, maybe 9 o'clock, and they were already fielding and working. And Peter Forni, who lived across the street from that property, and Lin Brown, who was a little farther away, were gardening. And I followed a line that went through trees that led to a three-sided shed with a telephone. And as I went to greet them and talk to them, the phone was ringing, and my type A personality was challenged by that. So I said, "Should I get it?" And a voice from through the trees and out into the salad said, "Sure, if you'd like." And I did, and it was a chef named Mark Durkheising. He says, "Who is this?" I said, "Who is this?" So we did the Laurel and Hardy thing, and he said, "See if the boys have some arugula for me." I said, "Do you have?" "Yes, sure." And he says, "I'll take a case." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I told him, and I said, "I'm going that way. Would you like me to deliver it?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, fine. So I went out and watched them pick it, and I was enchanted by the whole thing. I came to buy some arugula because I'd had it in a restaurant several nights before. And I did. I delivered the things, met Mark Durkheising more formally as the chef and he said, "Well, good, you're with them now, huh?" I said, "For like 20 minutes. And somehow, serendipitously, time went rather quickly, and my aging vineyard became a perfect spot to put in a new garden. So I became the third partner.
Oh, that is an amazing story. So tell me about the first two partners. They were gardeners, because I read in an article in Home and Garden that you said you love to talk, they love to garden. So it's been an amazing marriage.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, Lin Brown, both Lin and Peter are intellectually above me in lots of ways, and in their garden experience, no question. But Peter has a degree in anthropology, and Lin was political science, and I was an English major, so it's sort of weird of our personal disciplines and education, but they had established, they were working at a winery together at Charles Krug, and their love of gardening, what are you growing? What are you growing? Became something. Lin then asked Peter, said, I've started to sell a few things to a local grocery store, organic grocery store, which is no longer there. Would you like to help? He said, sure. So Peter started growing zucchini that had the blossom on it. Had to be picked early in the morning so it would stay supple, so you could use it for tempura or whatever the fashion was of the day. And Lin was growing salads, and it just kept expanding at a rate that they couldn't answer the phone. Barney Welsh walks in, and I could answer the phone.
I love it.
So
I love
it begins.
Yeah,
so
that's
it begins.
great.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
So they started out just selling to restaurants.
Restaurants only.
And an illustrious history, amazing history.
Yes.
So tell us about some of the great stories or the restaurants, the restaurateurs that you sold to. Tell us some of those funny stories.
Well, rather than funny, it became rather serious because the high priestess was Alice Waters. And Alice Waters had in her kitchen Catherine Brandell and Jeremiah Towers, and they were just on fire. And at the same time, there was the Fifth Floor, Square One, different restaurants in the city that were just exploding, and they were so unique, and they were sourcing out all the foods they could possibly get a hold of. And through a distributor, Lin and Peter would pick it, the distributor would pick it up and take it to a walk-in and chill it down, and then the next day would deliver it. Time quickly rolled along, and I, because of my ability or inability to not talk, I said, why don't we go to a few restaurants ourselves here in the valley? There was an explosion, and Joyce Goldstein wrote a book about the California food explosion, revolution, and it's out now. It's quite a nice book, and mentioned us in it. What happened was that theme of when, instead of sending stuff to New York like we were doing, or to Florida, or to Hawaii, we started narrowing it in, and we opened up, and I would go to a restaurant and say hi, you know? And we did Trevina, we did a bunch of different restaurants, and everything kept exploding with restaurants because the Napa Valley is so beautiful. Scenically, the wine, the culture, the food, the traditions, perfect growing things.
Perfect.
So we picked the salads in the morning for them, or the product, and delivered it to them that afternoon. So you or whomever your company was would be eating things that were so fresh. And people started thinking we did something so wonderful, so spectacular. And how is it we could make this so good and delicious? You're just not used to eating out of your own garden.
That was from the late 70s,
late
right?
70s, yeah.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of fresh foods, you know, it became the farm to table, which I find tiresome now to hear, but it became true.
So you were selling to restaurants all over the country and with famous chefs. And I love the story you told me once about Cindy Paulsen.
Cindy Paulsen was and is my most favorite human alive. Aww. She is talented, cute, wonderful, just an incredibly authentic human, which gets overused, the phrase authentic, but she qualifies for that. She was working at Meadowood under a chef named Holly Lake, and I delivered and was leaving, and she ran a little bit, she said, Barney, I did it. I said, you did? What'd you do? She said, I bought a restaurant that has failed, and it's apparently it's going to fail again because people are driving so fast on Highway 29. It's called a Golden Poppy, but I think I can do something, and I have a name. So you do? What is it? She said, I'm going to call it Mustards. I said, sure. So obviously, you know the trajectory of that.
Yes.
Well, speaking to the authenticity of Cindy, as our garden went along and she expanded so wildly, she did Fog City, Roti, Bic, the Buckeye Grill, opened a place in Japan for a short time. Wow. She would pull in our garden, fill her BMW convertible full of boxes of food, truly looked like something you wouldn't believe, and take it to the city. And her faithfulness stayed with us. We were doing business with Mustards until the very end. So I'm crazy about it
Yeah.
now. And she is talented.
She's so talented. And of course, she announced this week that she's
I know.
selling Cindy's Backstreet Diner.
Yes.
And she is opening up another Mustards at the San Francisco International Airport.
Yeah. Yeah. Shawn Knight, her general manager, is involved in that too. He's a fine chef too.
Yeah, yeah.
I first started selling to Shawn Knight when he had a restaurant called Pinot Blanc.
Oh, I remember Pinot Blanc. I was even here for
then
that.
Then it had many metamorphoses after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's been fun.
So tell us about some of the other restaurateurs that you sell to here.
Well, with the explosion of Yountville, at one time when the Michelin rating became online,
Yeah.
My understanding is that Yountville had more Michelin restaurants than any per capita city in the world.
Yeah, I believe it.
So we were doing Thomas Keller, but we had been doing business with him when he was in New York and shipping to him. Thomas Keller's place, the French Laundry, Bouchon, Richard Reddington, who I love,
Yes.
who has Red.
Yes.
Bistro Janté,
Yes.
but I was working with Philippe when he was at Domaine Chandon. There's a place called Frankie, Johnny and Luigi, that's changed several times. And as things kept expanding with their restaurant expansion in Yountville, like Ciccio,
Oh, yeah.
I love Ciccio.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
another fine woman, Polly Lapetita, who's now at Copia in Napa. So the harvest, using farmer vernacular, of talent, people wanted the pedigree of working for you, working for Thomas Keller, working somewhere. And that would spawn great talent that then would go on to be somewhere else and open their own restaurant, and we would go with them.
Oh, I love it.
I do too.
So you then started having an annual plant sale maybe 22 years ago.
Yeah.
How did you decide to do that?
Well,
Why did
by
you
being scolded. By being scolded, yeah. I was standing at the barn, and a lady drove up in her own chauffeur-driven car. Her chauffeur was driving, of course. And the window electronically went down. And being from an Irish Catholic family, kind of a bony finger beckoned me to the car, which I thought was an order. I got there, and she just lit into me. She, in a stuffy way, said she had just had a chocolate mousse at Auberge, and it had a white fraise du bois blanc on it. And I asked where they got it, and they told me, and I've been searching for days to find you. You're not in the phone book, and you should have a plant sale because I have this product. It's a white strawberry, an alpine strawberry, in my house in Paris, but I'd like to have it in my place here in the Napa Valley. And I said, well, do you want to buy some? She said no. She was cranky and drove away, never saw her again. That night, or afternoon, late afternoon, I told my partners, Lin and Peter, I said, you know, I just got chewed out, but the lady has we should have a plant sale. Because we were offering stuff, we got seeds from Europe, Asia. A chef would travel and bring back, can you grow this for me? Well, I don't know, let's see. And so we had product that wasn't readily available.
Right.
And thanks to the lady, in my Catholic school background, for being obedient and going to her side, we started a plant sale.
Oh, amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. And then what about the story about Mimi Sheraton of the New York, she was a New York Times
food critic, yeah.
Yeah,
for,
she's
for
92 years old now.
Yes, over 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, she came on one of those days it was hard to breathe. It was like 100 and something. It was hot. And so she showed up and walked in dressed like she should have been in New York and not in the Napa Valley in our garden.
I know your garden. I'm there every year.
So the gravel in her shoes. So she was doing a story on Thomas Keller and the French Laundry and Cindy Paulsen on mustards. And she said, well, both people insisted I see you because we buy from you. And so I thought, well, okay. Where do you begin? And my partner, Lin Brown, he picked every tomato himself to each restaurant. Not another person could pick it.
Oh, wow.
And it was hundreds and hundreds of pounds.
Yeah.
So he would pick it and put it in trays and then sort them and then put a mix together that the chefs had agreed would serve their needs the best. And he took his clippers, his Velcros, and he cut it. And she kind of like, how gauche of you, you know?
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
He said, try this. And she says, oh. So she did, and ladylike leaned forward to take a bite of tomato 1, tomato 2, tomato 3. She says, no. She said, I've been around the world. I've eaten all the finest foods. Please. And he said, well, try this one. And she bit into it, and she changed complexions, and the woman changed in her appearance and got kind. Said, "This is fabulous. Go get my husband." And he was sitting in the car with the air conditioner on, which was wise. So I bring him, he tastes it and says, "Oh, these are fabulous." The tomato is called the giant Syrian.
Oh.
So she said, "Well, this is wonderful. Do I have a place to wash up?" I said, "Yeah, a sink, a trough, you know." So she left, and 10 days later, we got a call from New York Times, said, she wants to let you know you're going to be in the glossy section of the New York Times this Sunday. And the giant Syrian is going to be the focus. So that's wonderful. Well, subsequently, there were 4 different articles in the New York Times by her, and she wrote a book, 1,000 Things to Eat Before You Die. And it was a giant Syrian at Forni-Brown.
Oh.
Well, the book came out, we got calls from all over the East Coast in particular. People want to make reservations thinking we were a restaurant. I said, no, we're not. But
because all the restaurants are promoting you and saying
Yeah.
they buy all their
Yeah.
fresh produce.
So in this 1,000 Things to Eat Before You Die, we're the only food source in the United States. The rest were Italy and France, and you know. Anyway, it's crazy, isn't it?
Incredible story. So what was it that you did, do you think, that made your produce so special that all of these famous chefs wanted it, from not just from Napa Valley, but from across the country?
Yeah, I think it was the idea of eating something so fresh. I don't like eggplant. I grew up not liking eggplant. And if I went to someone's house where they had eggplant, I would wind my way through it, but didn't like it.
Oh.
I started eating eggplant that same day where the skins weren't bitter yet, and realized it's that fresh quality of being picked and eaten immediately or within a certain time. And our salads were usually eaten the same day they were picked. Tomatoes were only picked, and they should have a 2 or 3 day shelf life. They weren't going to be trucked across the country, so we didn't have to pick them unripened and hope that someday the person who buys it will have the opportunity to eat a giant Syrian. It was picked that day, and the day it was supposed to be eaten. And I think that's it. Other than that, it wasn't quite unique. It's been done before.
You know, you can't go to a restaurant in Napa Valley and get a bad meal. It is so amazing to go to these restaurants from one end of the valley to the other. And the produce is amazing, and it all came from you guys.
Not all of it, for sure.
But most of it, yeah. So I have been planting a vegetable garden for, I want to say, 15 years. And, you know, I've had a few ups and downs, but mostly do very well. This year, my vegetable garden has gone to hell in a handbasket. I mean, it's just not going to produce.
Sad.
So you would think I would know better, but I don't really look after it. I oversee it and see that it's being flooded with water. So I know a lot of our viewers, because people, I know you don't like this expression, but farm to table. We all love farm to table. And many people have their own vegetable garden in Napa Valley. What is your advice for planting a vegetable garden, starting with what is the best thing to do? I mean, I have mine planted in half wine barrels. I have 10 half wine barrels. I've had raised beds before. And then I see people planting them in the ground, and I see people planting them in these big metal pots. What is the best way to plant?
Well, much like painting a room, preparation usually gives a great reward. When you've prepped things well, the paint job looks good. Much the same with the garden. If you prepare it well by tilling it, allowing it to have some fertilizer and have and not planting the tomatoes in the same location every year. It really drains
the nutrients. The nitrogen too, isn't it?
Yeah,
Is
the
it
nitrogen indeed.
Yeah.
Or calcium as well.
Right.
So that, but if you have a small backyard or opportunity only with that one bed, certainly amend it on your tomatoes, because that seems to be your focus.
Yeah.
Also, when you plant the tomato, put it in the bottom of the hole. Add calcium and a nice time-release fertilizer in the bottom of the hole, so the plant gets to marry its first earth experience, if you will, with some fertilizer and the calcium that'll help it grow. And it doesn't get that little blossom in rot thing, little thing on the bottom. And then water it good, staying on the tomato theme for about 4 or 5 days, and then cut down on the water. Twice a week at tops.
Okay, so I really want to drill down into these details. So it sounds like it's better that you plant either in a vegetable bed, raised bed, or the ground rather than a pot, because if it has to be tilled and changed and the soil's, you know, you have to put it into a different, right. So you move the tomatoes from one end of the garden to the other end the next year, so they're not in the same, so yeah, anyone who has pots keeps putting the tomatoes back.
Well, the pots are fine, and sometimes circumstances are the greater demand.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And the half wine barrel, which is so common and reasonable, the smaller the tomato, the greater success you'll have in a pot, in a wine barrel. The deeper rooted plant was going to be your larger tomato, and that's where you'll outgrow the wine barrel.
Oh, so don't put the big tomatoes in a half barrel, wine barrel.
Or lower your expectation.
Interesting. And then the other thing I know, about the only thing I do remember successfully, is that when you get a plant, you take it out of the pot, little plants that we buy from you. You take off the quite a few of the bottom leaves, and you really put that way down in the soil so the roots can spread.
You got it. You're on fire.
I know, but it's the watering that's the problem.
Well, the problem usually is, especially for absentee, and you have a busy life. You have several professions going. You're juggling lots of things.
Yeah.
So the demon is setting the timer and then driving away saying, well, that's done. It's on a timer, it's automatic. So if you're watering the lawn 12 minutes a day, and that same 12 minutes is going to the tomatoes every day, 7 days a week, most likely what you'll get is a huge big tomato plant that's green and luscious, but there'll be no tomatoes on it.
Yeah, and
you have to starve it because you want the taproot to seek out that water.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but for some reason this year I figured out I'm watering tomatoes or my vegetable garden on the same zone as my huge magnolia trees and roses. I'm like, it's worked every year before, but it's not working this year. So the moral of the story is keep your vegetable, if it's on automatic watering system, keep them completely separate to every other plant that needs different amount of water.
I think so.
But also, I want to ask you, if you have your vegetable garden with a lot of different vegetables, not just tomatoes, and tomatoes only need 2 days a week, like you totally wet them and make them very wet and then let them dry out. What about all the other things you might have planted and they're all being watered on the same zone?
Another villain for one of our favorite, good food, good friends, good wine makes a wonderful dinner.
Right.
A good garden is knowing the little disciplines within each of the plantings.
Yes.
Another violation, I think, in gardens, most common, would be to overwater basil. And most friends I have will look forward to, as I do, tomatoes and basil and the cheeses and for their summer delight. Well, the basil doesn't require as much water either. Daily watering is not so good.
So it's the same as the tomatoes, basil and tomatoes.
It's very similar.
So this is the tricky part, because let's just say you have one big vegetable bed or 3 big vegetable beds, and they're all on the same system. They're all going to get the same amount of water, either too little or too much, right? And speaking of watering, what is the best way to do it? I know we've tried everything. From the drip, little drip, and it's dropping. I've seen people do a drip from up here and it drops down. I have had drips around mine, and then I've also had the umbrella watering,
Yes.
So what is the best way to water them?
Well, keep in mind we're talking about disciplining in your garden, so controlling your water for the plants that don't require quite as much.
Yes.
And then how to water them. If we're going to continue to talk about tomatoes, I like the drip. You shouldn't overhead water tomatoes because there's a pollen, there's all kinds of things for it. But we are incredibly anal in that we won't allow anyone to plant or touch tomatoes who smokes. Because it changes the effect of the tomato's health, so to speak.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, I just did.
How does it affect the health? You mean by touching it or just having the scent?
It seems to stunt it. It seems to affect it. And I think the way to have a good garden is master your own garden.
Yes.
Learn your backyard may produce things that mine won't. And I can't grow, well, then don't try.
No.
If years and years and years and into it, it's not happening, or you're in a cold zone or something, it's going to just make you disappointed.
Yes, yeah. I sometimes don't even walk into my backyard for 3 weeks. I'm on rollerblades 24/7. what other vegetable? Oh, well, what I was going to say is that I do know that it's, especially up in Calistoga, which is where you were, the soils up there and the weather, I don't know what it is, but there is nothing that doesn't grow prolifically up there. It is unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you, we sent a soil sample out. We were doing a gardening in Napa Valley. We had 180 acres we were leasing out there. It was a gorgeous spot. But we were having trouble with resisting.
180 acres?
Yeah, well, 80, we were more caretaking land. It was from the Sonoma Land Trust. 80 acres of forest. But anyway, so we sent soil samples out saying, what are we doing wrong? And we sent out 7 and got 7 different results on the same property. The soil, much like a fence, that's not the planet. It's the dirt where you're growing. So we had to alter our gardening in that location based on our soil samples to see what would work. Much like Calistoga, there's a lot of clay.
Right.
So you can, at the clay, you get to the water, and you don't need as much water because it's not dissipating and draining. So it's just learning your own secrets to your own backyard.
Right,
yeah.
Right. I wanted to ask you, where do you think that all the restaurants are going to get their produce from now that ForniBrown's is closed? And that was your land, and so you've sold part of that to your daughter and her husband, Thomas Rivers Brown.
Yes.
And they are going to start a winery there?
Yeah, they're going to build a winery.
And you're hoping to build a house on the other part of your land?
Yeah, but I still want a garden.
You still, yeah.
But on a scale that a 75-year-old man can handle. It'll be a couple caterers. There's a young man, Josh Mitchell, who is... he raises his own pigs. He's crazy thinking that he's going to invent 27 hours of a day, but I just love the passion. It's the same passion I would see when I would go to a restaurant. I mean, restaurants to me are like different radio stations, different music. The pace of a French Laundry compared to Hurley's, compared to a Mustard's, all of them are different and unique, but the passion, they're doing what they want.
Right.
You know, it's not waiting to get home to do something else, although I'm sure they do.
Right.
And where they're going to get it, I hope, is someone will grow. There are people growing. It's the oldest profession in the world, by the way, contrary to belief.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting.
Every place you go, someone is gardening and farming and growing food. We all have to eat.
Yeah, it's become quite a sensation, hasn't it? Yeah.
And I came to the Napa Valley seeking the life that I've found. It's with a little slower pace. I was working in a high-speed world, enjoying myself more, finding the calmness that a garden, if you get down and start working on your hands and knees in a garden, a lot of that sound starts to shrink.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so part of the flavor of the food comes to the labor of growing it, sharing with another.
Right.
And then coming on your show and talking about it.
Oh, it's wonderful. Well, we have an amazing lifestyle here. There's no question, which is why we have this show.
Yeah, Inside Out.
And and tell me so we've just got a couple of minutes left. What does the future hold for you? Any plans?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, I'm
do tell.
Yes, I'm incredibly curious. I want to grow figs.
Oh, I do that well.
I love figs. I'm going to try and grow some peaches, and then I'm still going to vegetable farm for 2 small caterers. I don't know. I've started working at 14, you know, and then all the interruptions of school and military and all that. But I like it. I like getting out of bed and having something to do and to look forward to.
Well, do you think you'll sell from your garden?
I will sell to the caterers.
Yes.
I don't think we'll do open to the public.
Because how much land would you be able to plant?
I'll still have, after Thomas, the Rivers Marie, that's the brand they have, after their winery, which is only a little less than an acre, I'll still have 2.5 acres.
Oh, that's a lot.
It's a lot of work, yeah.
I have to tell you about my fig tree. I had the most huge fig tree, and the night of the fires, it fell down.
Oh my God.
100%. And you know what? It's half the size now, and it's back. It's unbelievable. Like, it laid down for several days because we all took off, right?
Yes.
It might have been laid down for 10 days, actually. This massive tree across the pool, and it's back and looks like it's going to be just fine.
Yeah, I think fig trees and olive trees, they're pretty hard to kill.
They're pretty hard to kill.
You've got to work hard to mess them up.
Yeah. It's been so wonderful to have you on the show.
Well.
Oh my gosh, I think everybody's going to be wanting to know
Yeah.
all this advice on planting a vegetable garden and maintaining it.
I think another way to enjoy your vegetable garden is eat out and see what the professionals do with it.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
It's a wonderful time.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's good to be with you.
Thank you so much. It was really, really fun.
Be good to your garden.
Yes. I actually need to start paying attention to my garden.
Indeed.
In all my spare time, which of course there is zero. But yeah.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed myself.
Thank you.